I am here with Eric Franklin. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Maybe start off by telling us a little bit about the Franklin method.
Okay. Well, the Franklin method started very organically. So it's not that I said, oh, one day I'm going to start a method now. It also happened because I had physical problems myself. I was a dancer training in New York. I was at NYU School of the Arts, and I developed all kinds of pains, back pain, knee pain, foot pain, you name it. And that kind of started my journey on, what am I doing to create this? And actually discovered that a lot of the things that I was being told and the way I visualized my body were actually incorrect. And so I went on this journey of discovery and, I learned about the body for sure, but, that's not good enough. You also need to have a way to implement better function into your system. And that, of course, we do through cueing as vocal teachers. And one of the big things in cueing, maybe the main thing in cueing, is imagery. So I became kind of an imagery specialist, you could say, and I've done studies on imagery. And so I teach people how to use imagery and how to use imagery to embody their best vocal anatomy or dancing anatomy or what it would be.
I think this imagery part is what I find so fascinating because imagery kind of fell out of favor in recent years in certain parts of the voice teaching world. And I think it was because it was based on an incomplete understanding of the body, and also the imagery tended to be enforced by the teacher. And
Right.
you have a very different approach. Maybe speak to that.
Exactly. I can fully understand how it could fall out of favor because my suspicion is what's happening is the teachers are having their personal metaphors or their way of formulating an image. And to understand imagery, we have to kind of really step back first and just look a little bit at the science. So imagery is actually a really cool thing. I mean, it's your ability to generate a sensory experience, a kinesthetic, visual, auditory experience in your mind. And this experience has actually an effect on your performance, on how you move and how you sing and so forth. This is a wonderful tool. And I like to base all the imagery on function. So we know the vocal cords work like this, or the diaphragm works like that, and then we can extrapolate metaphors from there. But what often happens is that teachers have the metaphors they like, which is only one type of imagery, by the way, and they use them, and they're not a good fit with their students. So a metaphor is a type of image. It's basically a borrowed experience. If I say, your shoulder blades are slippery bars of soap, move your shoulders up and down, nice and slidey. You may not like soap or think that's I don't enjoy that image. So a teacher always have to be aware, is the metaphor I'm using to help my student improve their vocal production really something they like? Does it solve their problems? Does it fit with them? And if I liked it, it doesn't mean it works for them. So I think that's the first thing. Metaphors are always personal. So I like to use a lot of anatomical imagery because that's very direct, it's clear, it's scientific. And if I use metaphors, I always want to be able to say, well, this metaphor is kind of based on this function. However, there is more still. So if we step back again, you can use imagery while you're moving or while you're singing, but also as a preparation before you're doing it. And actually they have different names. So if you're using imagery while you're moving, while you're singing, it's called dynamic because you're moving. And if you're not moving, then it tends to be called motor imagery or action imagery. And there's many more different kind of types. And the thing about imagery is that you can imagine doing things you're not able to do yet. So let's say you want to sing in a certain way and you hear a voice, someone else singing, you go, wow, that is I would like to be able to do that. You can imitate that in your mind. And the research shows that really works. So you imitate that action in your mind and you literally are training your brain to get ready for that. So that's a third type of imagery. So imagining doing something you can't do just yet by imitating someone else's skill. Then dynamic imagery, using imagery while you're moving. and then of course using imagery while you're not moving as a preparation.
And I think with singers, one of the things that I found really helpful for me is beyond, there's imagery and really thinking it, and then there's silent practice where you go through all of the moves, but you're not making sound. And
Exactly.
yeah, and I love the fact that you really do look at function and the cause and effect, because if we just jump to imagery without understanding, that may not work so well. Yes.
Exactly. So if you would be in a full-fledged class, we would of course start with looking at all the structures, the cartilages, the muscles that are involved in these function, and we would aim to embody them. So be able to visualize them, feel them. We might touch the thyroid or cricoid cartilage, feel the different membranes, the fascia. You were asking about that as well earlier, the fascia involved in vocal production. So we're clear about it. Where are they? Where do they attach? How do they move? What do they do? What is their best function? And so step by step, we start to experience how this all works. And if we can experience how it works, number one, we experience, am I using it well? And B, if I'm not using it well, what would be a better way? What would be a better function? So it's hard to even know what you're doing that's not ideal if you don't know what you're doing. So the first step is to learn some anatomy, even if it's basic, and go, okay, now I get it. Oops, I don't think I've been doing that quite correctly. Or, as we were talking, my posture is off. Just even slight changes in posture totally change the tension in the muscles involved in vocalizing.
What I love is you have a very precise way of creating an event and then analyzing and then figuring out ways within yourself to improve it. Maybe walk through how a singer can employ that in the practice room.
Right, so we would be sitting together and we would look at, okay, let's say today's class is about working with the tongue, right? And you start from scratch, you got very important tongue placement and so forth, we know that. Okay, there's intrinsic muscles, there's extrinsic muscles, great. We look at them on diagrams, or I have, like a model here, we look at it on the model. We would try to visualize them first, and then we would go through one muscle after the other and engage it. Like geniohyoid, stylohyoid, all these different muscles, would work with it. Can we use them appropriately? Are they flexible enough? Are they strong enough? And so forth. And then we would put it all together and then apply it to whatever we're working on right now from a singing perspective, and see what differences it make. And so we would go through the different parts like that until we have a holistic whole of better functioning. But usually I always start class with teaching, okay, what is imagery? How does it work? How does it not work? What are the different types? How can you use it for yourself? How can you practice your singing even if you're in a bus, and going somewhere? You can use imagery and practice at that time. I would first do an introduction to imagery, and then we would look at the anatomy and embody the anatomy, and then apply it to singing practice.
What do you think of negative practice? Kind of doing it wrong on purpose just so you can see, okay, that's how that feels. This is what's associated with that, and then working corrections off that exaggeration.
That has been shown to be useful. I mean, it's also called error amplification. So you amplify an error to know now that's definitely wrong. And I think it's useful. I mean, not, for everything, but for a lot of things. If it's hard to understand, well, why would this work better? And I don't understand why this structure should be doing that. Then you don't do it or do it incorrectly. That doesn't work at all. So yeah, I use that quite a bit. So doing the wrong thing to understand that's definitely not good. Like, for example, what happens if you're singing with your shoulders all tight, or with your forward head, or, things like that. Definitely useful.
What should singers know about fascia? Because this is something that's just now coming into the vocal pedagogy world.
Yeah, well, obviously I think you start basically with structural components. So you would start with the bones, with the cartilage. You got to have a good picture of that, because if you just go right into fascia, it's too confusing. Then I would add the muscles, because the muscles are the motors, they move things. Fascia is, after all, passive structure. So the muscles use the fascia to create certain effects, like to transfer force or to store energy. But I think it's good to start with the supporting structures, then add the muscles, and then add in the fascia. And then, yeah, it's extremely useful. I teach the fascia surrounding the vocal area a lot. So you have the investing fascia on the surface, the superficial layer of the deep fascia of the neck called investing fascia. Then you would go deeper to the fascia relating to the infrahyoid and suprahyoid muscles, then with the hyoid bone. Then you go to the pretracheal fascia in front of the trachea relating to the thyroid and cricoid cartilages, and you visualize that, and you do stretches and movements, and you feel the connections, and then every time after you stretched and moved something or released an area, you see, okay, how does that affect my singing? So yeah, it's a very systematic thing. I have a 2-day course just on the fascia of the shoulder and the neck. So yeah, there's a lot you can do, but it takes an introduction. You have to first, okay, what is fascia? How can you affect it? La la la. It's a like that. But you start very systematic. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that.
That's fantastic. A lot of what we do as singers is actually adjusting acoustics, because so much of what you hear from the singer is actually interactions of sound wave and resonances in the vocal tract. How can we, because these are sensations as the body absorbs it that are ever changing and they're somewhat phantom, how can we better connect with this rather mysterious instrument in terms of our mind-body connection?
Well, I don't like to use this word that much, but it's called awareness. Becoming more and more aware. And the first step in awareness is to basically calm down and stop all the mental clatter that's going on. So one of the first exercises, when we start out, one of the things we do is we tap our body, because tapping releases tension and makes you more aware. That's like step number 1. And that's a little tapping, sometimes a little shaking of the body just to release tension. And that actually also helps the fascia. It allows fascial planes to glide better, gives you more flexibility. And then the next exercise, which I always say, well, this is the most challenging one. For 1 minute, we're going to do nothing but feel our body. So feel posture, breathing, tension. And that is hugely challenging for people, to not overthink and just feel for a moment. And so that is very foundational. Improving your ability to sense what's going on, because some things, as you were saying, cannot be learned intellectually, certainly not in singing. You have to sense it, you have to feel it, you have to be able to visualize it. So improving the skill of being present and sensing what's going on a super subtle level, small shifts in the voice, the posture, and how that all relates, being able to literally visualize the sound you're producing as in color or as a shape or things like that, and manipulating the shape. That takes a lot of calming down, a lot of increasing your awareness, and there is no limit to increasing your awareness of what you're doing. There is no limit. You can always be better at that. So my recommendation there is step number 1, learn how to calm down and be fully present, and ramp up that awareness of what's going on. Create a mental picture of what it looks like, what you're doing, visually, auditorily, and see how you can manipulate to improve your voice. So you're creating your own little schema to work with as well. But it takes those steps of like, first, okay, don't accept I'm aware enough. No, you're not. You can be more aware always.
I think that brings up the fascinating point of what to think about. That was my struggle as I was learning to sing, and is still my struggle at times, is what do I do with my mind? What do I do with my mind when I'm practicing? And then what do I do with my mind in performance?
Yeah, well, definitely there's a difference there. In practice, obviously you're refining the tools, the machinery, the muscle, the fashion, everything like that. You're not going to think about that in performance. So then we have performance imagery. Then we have imagery that relates to how you want to project your sound, how you want to relate to your audience, how you want to tell the story. I mean, obviously there's words when you're singing, so there's the theatrical component in there as well. And there's lots of imagery that relates to the theatrical component. So how you work with expressing emotions or expressing a story. And imagery is also huge in acting. It's a big thing. All actors learn about imagery, and there's quite a few acting teachers and singing coaches using the kind of imagery that we learn in the Franken method, and it's hugely important for acting. So all those elements come in as well. So obviously you also learn about those, the theatrical aspect and the expressive aspect. And then maybe also just the topic of stage fright, you know, how do you stay centered, calm and confident when you perform? I think that's a huge thing. And there's lots of cool like things you can do if you notice, oh my God, I'm totally off like this, and to just like get you down into your body. So there's some, you know, nice hacks there. Sometimes we have these balls and things like that we use. So if someone really, nothing's working, like you can take these things, you can tap yourself or put them in your armpits and release your shoulders or massage your feet, like any kind of grounding thing. So there's also tools like that you can help yourself. So I think that grounding, feeling confident, being expressive, that would be then the next level that you need when you perform and when you sing in front of an audience.
I want to jump subjects and talk a bit about neuroplasticity and how it changes as we age. Do we still have neuroplasticity available to us as we get older?
Well, the fast answer is yes. Exactly. Yes, we do. I mean, we can change as long as we exist. The body, the nervous system has the ability to change. Probably as you age, you have to work harder to create these changes. But of course, one thing we know, especially about the brain, is that movement in general is good for the brain, especially the hippocampus part, so the memory part. And also the hippocampus is also about de-stressing, which is very important. And that part benefits very much from movement, so has the ability to regenerate. But really, the thing is, the studies on aging and neuroplasticity show, yes, you lose brain cells as you age, but you don't lose the ability to create new connections. So neuroplasticity isn't just about, oh, my hippocampus is regenerating, I'm creating new cells in my hippocampus. It's also about improving neural connections. And that you can do forever, literally. And one of the good things also about imagery is that it uses more of the brain when you're imagining doing a movement than when you're actually doing it. So if you imagine yourself singing, you hear yourself singing, for example, you're actually using more of the brain. The brain has to actually work harder to do that than if you're actually singing, which means it's great training for your brain to imagine singing. So if you want to, so imagining doing something is good for your brain because it really gets your brain involved. It's a more challenging task.
And I would imagine that we can get better and better and more precise at this imagining as we practice it.
Exactly. It's a learning, it's a skill that improves with practice. And people go like, oh, do I really have to also learn that skill and I this and that? Well, the thing is, imagery is a fundamental life skill. Without imagery, you can't do anything. You can't plan, you can't remember, you can't act. And it's a fundamental skill. Your brain is made to do imagery because it used to mean survival. You get up in the morning and go, okay, where is the river? Where can I find the berries? So it's fundamental to our survival. And so it's a basic skill built into our life and our evolution. And so this kind of skill, just like movement, is very good for your brain. So movement obviously produces BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which helps your brain to regenerate. But using imagery uses so much of the brain, stimulates so much of the brain, that it also helps the brain improve and create new synapses. In fact, we know that using imagery improves your cognition. So you get more intelligence, kind of brain training. Even if what you're doing is not related to, let's say, a mathematical equation or counting. If you, before you do your singing practice with imagery, you do some kind of mathematical simple task like counting backwards, and then afterwards you do it again, you're actually better. And then there's maybe another thing, you know, you feel better after singing, obviously, because it's an internal massage and you love to do it and all that like that. But research shows that the fact you're using imagery while you're teaching or practicing, the fact that you're using imagery is mood regulating. So scientists are always looking for things, okay, what improves people's mood? Because then they perform better, sing better. Imagery improves people's mood. So if you use more imagery rather than, you know, ruminating and thinking about stuff, it regulates your mood, it improves your mood. And then to add that on, talking about neuroplasticity, we know that if you have a better mood, you reduce inflammation in the body. So you have inflammation, inflammaging is the thing, you know, like as you get older, you're more inflamed. It's the cause of every disease known to man, la la la. So you can improve your mood, then of course that is also very beneficial for your brain and your body in general. And so imagery does that as well, and movement.
How would you suggest that singers and voice teachers start learning your method? What's a great introduction?
Well, you know, just take something, a short little introduction, like a short little webinar. So I have this free webinar available for the audience that they can download and look at for free. It's on the voice, it's on using imagery for the voice. So maybe start with that. And if you like that, then you can move on to specific topics like the one I mentioned, shoulder and neck or posture or something like that. So maybe start with that. If you can put it in the link, you start with that, it's free. And then, oh, I like that or that, I want to know more about this aspect or that aspect, then you move on to that.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Henry.